The chamber hissed as the last of the cryogenic mist bled away, and Dr. Cayley's Wren leaned closer to the observation glass, for eyes narrowing in clinical fascination. The specimen inside, designation, Captain Darian Voss, human, Terran military, had been frozen for 143 standard years, recovered from the wreckage of a derelict escape pod drifting at the edge of the Threll belt. Vitals stabilizing, said the assistant drone hovering at Kelly's shoulder. Cellular degradation, negligible. This is remarkable, Doctor. Humans were not engineered for long-term suspension. By every model we possess, this organism should be dead. And yet, Cayley's murmured, he isn't. That was the trouble with humans. Every model the Threll Compact had built about them turned out to be wrong eventually, usually at the worst possible moment for whoever was relying on the model. Cayley's had been assigned to Outpost Verath for 9 years, leading the Compact's foremost cryo-research division. The work was supposed to be simple: recover lost human military assets from the old wars, study them, learn whatever could be learned, and quietly catalog the rest as historical curiosities. Humanity itself had not been seen in this sector for over a century, scattered, some said extinct, the victims of their own reckless expansion into space the Compact had warned them to avoid. Captain Darian Voss was meant to be a curiosity. A relic. A name in a database. His eyes opened, and Cayley's realized immediately that he was nothing of the sort. The first thing Voss felt was the cold leaving his bones, not gone, but receding, like a tide pulling back from a shore it had owned for longer than it should have. The second thing he felt was the restraints. He didn't move. Not yet. A soldier who survives a war learns patience before he learns anything else, and the part of Voss's mind that had gone into the ice as a 28-year-old captain in the Seoul Defense Corps was, underneath everything, still that soldier. He listened. He catalogued. Unfamiliar language over the speakers, translated half a second later into accented English by some kind of implant device. Four-eyed alien researcher outside the glass, posture non-threatening, tone clinical. Restraints standard, not military grade. No visible weapons in the room. Good, he thought. Not a prison. A lab. I can work with a lab. Captain Voss, the alien said, voice gentle, almost apologetic. My name is Dr. Cayley's Wren. You are aboard Threll Outpost Verath. You have been in cryogenic suspension for approximately 143 of your years. I understand this is disorienting. You are not in danger. I want you to know that first. Voss said nothing for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough from disuse but steady. 143 years. Yes. My ship? Lost. We recovered only your pod. My crew? Cayley's hesitated, and that hesitation told Voss everything he needed to know before the words even came. There were no other survivors recovered. Voss closed his eyes. 1 breath. 2. Then he opened them again, and something in his expression had gone very still, very quiet, the kind of quiet that experienced people learn to be afraid of. And Earth? Captain, I don't have reliable data on the current state of human civilization. Communications with your species ceased decades ago. Many believe that we're extinct, Voss finished. Yeah. I've heard that one before. Heard it from worse than you. What the Threll Compact didn't understand, what almost no species in that quadrant of the galaxy understood, was that humanity had never actually been good at war in the way other species measured the word. They didn't have the biggest fleets, the most efficient logistics, the most elegant tactical doctrines. What they had, century after century, conflict after conflict, was an absolute, bone-deep refusal to accept that a situation was over until it was actually over. Captain Darian Voss had been frozen mid-retreat, his ship gutted, his crew scattered, fighting a holding action against an enemy that no longer existed by any name the Compact recognized. He did not know that the war he'd been fighting had ended 90 years ago. He did not know that humanity, far from extinct, had spent the intervening century rebuilding, expanding, and quietly becoming something the rest of the galaxy had started referring to, in hushed, uneasy tones, as a problem that solved itself in the worst possible direction if you pushed it. He knew none of this. He only knew that he had gone into the ice fighting, and the part of him that mattered most had never stopped. Over the following weeks, Kaylee's ran every test her facility possessed. The data was, in her own private notes, anomalous beyond reasonable explanation. Voss's muscle density had not atrophied, if anything, the suspension process, combined with whatever experimental serum the old Terran military had pumped into its soldiers, had left him stronger than baseline human readings from the era. His healing rate, once awakened, was nearly triple what compact medical texts described. His pain tolerance registered as a near-flat line on instruments calibrated for far more advanced species. "You're not adapting to your environment," Kaylee said one evening, reviewing scans while Voss sat across from her, still restrained at the wrists by compact order, still watching her with that unsettling patience. "You're overriding it." "That's one way to put it," Voss said. "Most species, removed from their era by a century and a half, exhibit psychological collapse within days. You exhibit none of the expected markers." "I had time to think in there," Voss said quietly. "More time than you'd believe. A man can come to terms with a lot of things, frozen in the dark, if he decides he's going to." Kaylee studied him. There was no anger in his voice, no despair, only a terrible, settled resolve, like a blade that had finished being sharpened and was simply waiting to be used. "What have you decided, Captain?" Voss looked at the restraints on his wrists, then back up at her. "That I'm getting out of this chair. One way or the other." The breakout, when it came, was not dramatic. That was what unsettled the outpost's security team most, afterward, reviewing the footage. Voss did not rage. He did not shout. He simply waited until a single guard entered to administer a routine sedative, standard procedure, low-risk classification, the kind of task nobody thought twice about, and in the space of 4 seconds, the restraints meant to hold a creature with compact average bone density were bent, not broken, bent, and the guard was unconscious on the floor without a mark on him beyond a pressure point Voss had learned from a Marine sergeant 143 years dead. He didn't kill anyone. That, too, unsettled them. A century of compact propaganda had painted humans as a species of barely restrained violence, the wreckage of their old wars cited as proof. But Voss moved through Outpost Verath like a man clearing a path, not a man taking revenge, disabling, restraining, redirecting, always with exactly the amount of force required and not 1 ounce more. He found Kaylee's in her lab, alone, exactly where he knew she'd be. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, before she could speak. "You've been straight with me since I woke up. That counts for something." "What do you want, Captain?" "The truth. All of it. Where my people are. What's happened in 143 years. And then, he paused, and for the first time since the ice had melted off him, something almost like exhaustion crossed his face. "I want to go home." Kaylee's looked at this man, frozen out of an era her species had quietly hoped was over, strong enough to bend compact restraint alloy with his bare hands, and patient enough to have done it without a single drop of blood spilled. She thought about every report, every warning, every uneasy diplomatic cable about the species called human that had crossed her desk over the years. She had always assumed they were exaggerations. She was beginning to suspect they weren't exaggerated at all. They were, if anything, understated. "Sit down, Captain Voss," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her own. "I'll tell you everything I know. And then I think I'm going to help you find your way home." Voss allowed himself, for the first time in 143 years, something close to a smile. "Doctor," he said, "that's the first good news I've had all century." Outside the lab, alarms were still sounding through the corridors of Outpost Verath, security teams scrambling to account for an escaped prisoner who had, by every metric they possessed, already won. He was encased in ice for 143 years. Now nothing in the quadrant was strong enough to stop him.